Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to our webinar. We have a fabulous new webinar for you today with Celebrity Cruises with our Alaska Cruisetour product. We are so happy you're able to join us. My name is Kimberly Smith, and I am the Market Sales Manager for Celebrity Cruises, and I work very closely with the CruiseWeb. Today, guys, we have a fantastic special guest. We are very lucky to have the one, the only Brendan Holcomb. Hello, Brendan. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Kim. How are you doing today?
I am fabulous. I'm excited because everyone is so excited to hear more about our Alaska Cruise Tours. We've been talking about it amongst the agents, amongst our customers here at the CruiseWeb, and we're really excited to get started and to show them what's coming up for next year and why it is so important to go to Alaska. And do not wait, people. It's time to go now. Let's get those reservations booked for next year and get ready. Get it on the planner.
Yeah, so really excited to be here. Great opportunity to talk about Alaska, about the experiences that you'll be having there. It is the most amazing destination. I spent many years working on board cruise ships and spent roughly 4 of those years cruising the southeastern coastline of Alaska. The last 6 years I've been working with the interior of Alaska on our land and sea experiences. And something that has always stayed with me from the years that I was with guests in Alaska is how rare it is to see someone come away from those experiences and not be genuinely moved, not be genuinely touched by all they've seen and felt. And what's so beautiful about that is how not new it is. One of the great authors and explorers, John Muir, wrote in his book about his travels in Alaska in 1897 that to the lover of wilderness, Alaska is one of the most wonderful countries in the world. So let's take a look at a map of Alaska, because as you explore visiting Alaska, your question becomes, well, how do I and my loved ones, how do we have the Alaskan experiences that we want?
And what is helpful to recognize in exploring that is how big Alaska truly is. When you frame the state of Alaska by the lower 48, you begin to see that. Alaska is not just the largest U.S. state. If you were to split Alaska in two, those two pieces would be the first and second largest U.S. state, with Texas coming in third. And amidst that size, the culture and mountains and wilderness and wildlife and glaciers are dispersed. Amidst that size is a population of just 730,000. That's almost a square mile for every resident. Amidst that size, there are 12 regions of native Alaskan groups stretching from the Aleutian Islands on the western tip all the way to the northernmost parts of the U.S. Amidst that size, there is more coastline than the East Coast, the West Coast, and the Gold Coast combined, with over 600 named glaciers and humpback whales and killer whales and sea lions, to name just a few in its surrounding waters. Amidst that size, there are mountain ranges that stretch all the way from the Kenai Peninsula to Canada, including the tallest peak in North America, with the surrounding lands populated by brown bear, moose, caribou. I could go on. To experience more of all Alaska has to offer, I believe exploring by both land and sea is the ideal. Now, just a cruise to Alaska is phenomenal. And we have 3 ships with differing itineraries. There is some variation across the season as to ports visited, but primarily the Millennium sails northbound from Vancouver to Seward, or the reverse. I'm showing southbound here, where there's first scenic cruising at Hubbard Glacier before you cross down into the Inside Passage, where you'll visit Icy Strait, Skagway, and Juneau, and then sail south to Ketchikan. What is wonderful about a cruise that includes Vancouver is that you'll sail through the Johnstone Strait, which is a passageway between Vancouver Island and mainland Canada that is, for my money, one of the most beautiful stretches of water in the world. Eclipse also sails out of Vancouver as part of a round-trip itinerary, sailing through the Johnstone Strait and into Hecate Strait before stopping at Icy Strait, then scenic cruising at Hubbard Glacier before stopping at Juneau and Ketchikan, then returning to Vancouver. And the Solstice departs from Seattle as part of a round-trip sailing. She sails on the outside of Vancouver Island, stopping at Ketchikan with scenic cruising at Endicott Arm, then further stopping at Juneau, Skagway, and Victoria, which is a highlight of Seattle sailings. 3 phenomenal itineraries on beautiful ships. And what you'll have just seen in the differing itineraries is a lot of consistency in the ports that are visited that include Juneau, one of my favorite ports. It's so rare not to have incredible whale watching experiences in Juneau. As the whales migrate down from Hawaii in early spring through the Pacific to the feeding grounds of Alaska, and as you go out on whale watching excursions, to be in the proximity of mammals this massive on a small boat tour. Humpbacks can grow up to 60,000 pounds, and when their tails, their flukes, are lifted high into the air as they go into their dive sequence, it's very cool to experience up close. And if you're lucky, as I have been a few times, you'll see what's called bubble net feeding, when humpback whales hunt cooperatively, diving below schools of fish, using their blowholes to trap them. It's complex, amazing to experience, and almost uniquely Alaskan. The coastal glaciers in Alaska provide the nutrients for the habitats that encourages bubble net feeding. Also in Juneau, beautiful glaciers and ice fields. Mendenhall Glacier is just 12 miles away from the port and is one of the most easily accessible glaciers. Incredible views to be had of Mendenhall with a hike or by boat or by plane. Norris Glacier, which like Mendenhall is part of the Juneau ice field, is the destination for dog sledding on a glacier. But just seeing the Juneau ice field is spectacular. 1,500 square miles and the birthing ground of 38 major glaciers. And talk about wilderness. I love this. NASA chose the Juneau ice field for their pre-lunar training as it's one of the places on Earth that, I quote, captured the emotional sensations that one might encounter while walking on the moon. So amazing. Skagway is the gold rush town in south central Alaska. Much of the town is within the Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park, and that's because in the late 1800s, Skagway was the starting point for 40,000 gold prospectors who were headed to the Yukon by way of the Chilkoot Trail. And this is incredible history. The British Canadians prohibited prospectors entering Canada unless they had a year's supply of food and 1,000 pounds of equipment a person. And they're hiking this trail. It's 20 degrees. Avalanches could easily kill 50 men at a time. Alaska is rich with the history of perseverance and the pride in that perseverance of what it took to settle Alaska. And when you are there, you will feel that from its residents. A few years later, the White Pass and Yukon Railroad opened, and that is the train that you can ride today. 5 minutes from the ship to the embark station, and just spectacular. The incredible history, the breathtaking scenery, the peaks and valleys and mountaintops and rivers, the differing perspectives as the elevation changes over 3,000 feet. And when you get up in the top into Canada, instead of returning by rail, my recommendation is to debark and come down the hill to Skagway by bike. It's an easy 15-mile downhill coast, and it's so beautiful. Now, if you do want to use your legs, try hiking to here. This is Upper Dewey Lake, really spectacular. The trail is a 5-mile loop with 3,000 feet of elevation. Ketchikan is Alaska's gateway city. It's the first port set at the southernmost entrance to Alaska's Inside Passage. Much of the city is built over water due to the difficulty in blasting away the surrounding hills. This is the historical boardwalk Creek Street. Some really interesting curio shops here and also great for salmon watching. At the end of Married Man's Trail, you can see the salmon jumping up the rushing waterfalls. One of the real joys of traveling southeast, south central, and the interior of Alaska on a cruise tour is to connect with the differing Alaska native cultures like the Tlingit and the Pacific Northwest Coast, or the Athabascan ethno-linguistic groups in the interior. At Cape Fox Lodge, which is tucked into a hillside, easy to get there with a funicular, there is a gorgeous 6 totem pole circle representing the culture of the Northwest Coast peoples. Also easily accessible, few minutes walk from the ship's dock, is the Lumberjack Show, which is straight up a fun and exciting family show. There's competition tree climbing, souped up chainsaws, running along floating logs. Kids especially will love it, as they will all of Alaska. It's such a great active family destination. If you think the Magic Castle created a sense of wonderment in your young ones, try seeing them watch a 50,000-pound whale breach the ocean. Or head over to Neats Bay Creek and watch them be 10 meters from black bears fishing for salmon. It opens when the salmon season begins. It's one of the best destinations on Southeast Alaska to see black bears. One of the great wilderness experiences during the cruise is flying amongst the misty fjords. This is very, very special. The fjords and rock walls jut 3,000 feet straight out of the ocean. The almost constant precipitation is what creates the mistiness in misty fjords. It's surrounded by the Tongass National Forest, which is the largest intact temperate rainforest in the world, spanning 500 miles. Everyone should take the opportunity to see Alaska from up top. Whether it's from a cable car, hiking a mountain, or flight sightseeing, there's such beauty in the differing perspective you get. Icy Strait Point in the town of Hoonah on Chigagof Island won Port of the Year in 2020 at the Sea Trade Cruise Awards in competition from ports around the world. An amazing accomplishment from the Hoonah Tlingit people. It has no buses. Instead, there are transporter gondolas. So to get anywhere, you're sailing through the treetops, which is fabulous to take in the surrounding views, which are beautiful. To the east of the Juneau ice fields, to the north they have Glacier Bay. This is their zip rider, over a mile in length, and as you go down the hill, the view is spectacular. As I said, take an opportunity to see Alaska from up top. You can reach speeds of up to 80 miles an hour on this. Also, incredible whale watching. Icy Strait Point is located around the corner from Point Adolphus that has a body of water coming out of Glacier Bay. All that water is nutrient rich. And as it meets the Pacific water, it attracts krill, making it one of the best destinations in Alaska to see whales. And coastal brown bears. I mentioned Neats Bay Creek in Ketchikan is one of the best destinations on Southeast Alaska to see bears. Well, the other is at Spassky River. Chigagof Island is home to over 3,500 bears. Hundreds of bears call Spassky River home and feed off of the salmon throughout the summer. So let's talk about glaciers. It's part of the romance of Alaska. And as with so many experiences in the last frontier, it's awe-inspiring. It's uncommunicable. It can't be told. It has to be felt. I think Mark Twain came as close to anyone to articulating it when he wrote in 1880, "A man who keeps company with glaciers comes to feel tolerably insignificant by and by." When moist air coming off the Gulf of Alaska hits the Coast Range Mountains, it dumps heavy, wet snow and compacts down to what's called firn. That packs down and forms ice, and with gravity eventually becomes a glacier. Alaska has more glaciers than anywhere in North America, and one of the finest displays of tidewater glaciers, which are the valley glaciers that flow all the way down to the ocean, than anywhere in the world. And there are a multitude of options for glacier viewing on an excursion, but as you are cruising, you will also have scenic glacial cruising from the ship. And there are a few. You may have heard of Glacier Bay, Hubbard Glacier, Tracy-Elm Fjord, Endicott. These are all fabulously beautiful destinations. Now they all have distinct personalities. Glacier Bay has hundreds of differing glaciers and several tidewater glaciers that sadly have been thinning and receding over the last few decades. Tracy-Elm Fjord has deep fjords over 30 miles long and as high as 3-story buildings, and the journey revealing the twin northern and southern Sawyer Glacier at the end of Tracy-Elm is spectacular. Endicott, Tracy-Elm's beautiful neighbor on the southern edge of the Terra Wilderness, has a 3,000-foot vertical enclosure that leads to Dawes Glacier, standing 600 feet tall and half a mile wide. And then there is Hubbard, the largest tidewater glacier in North America. Since measuring began in the late 1800s, Hubbard has been thickening and advancing. It stands 7 miles wide and in places 15 stories high, and the captain will slowly turn the ship in Disenchantment Bay for better viewing, while a dedicated onboard naturalist narrates the experience. It is an awesome day. And when a glacier calves from the face of Hubbard into the ocean with cracking and booming that could be heard more than 2 miles away, you'll understand why the native Tlingit people called it white thunder. Watch for the little pieces of ice. The little pieces tell you the big piece is ready to go, and you'll never forget how that felt. 3 phenomenal cruise itineraries on 3 beautiful ships. And whether you are on Solstice, Eclipse, or Millennium, so many opportunities to take in so much of what Alaska has to offer. But only one ship, the Millennium, crosses the Gulf to dock in Seward. And Seward is the access point to the interior of Alaska. Sailing on the Millennium and embarking or debarking in Seward creates the opportunity to elevate all of the incredible wilderness and wildlife and mountain and glacier experiences on a cruise by further traveling into the interior of Alaska on a multi-night land tour. And that's all a cruise tour is. A 7-night northbound, southbound cruise on the Millennium combined with a 2 to 6 night celebrity land tour. Vancouver to Seward is roughly 1,200 miles as the crow flies. Seward to Fairbanks is another 500 miles. And the destinations along the way of Homer, Alaska, Anchorage, Talkeetna, Denali, Fairbanks, they're stunning. But time is different. Your daily experiences are different. The beauty of a cruise is being immersed in the port destination during the day, then relaxing into your cruise in the evening. On the land tour, you're in it all of the time. Whether it is traveling one of the only 4 major roads or riding a rail line, which is the lifeblood of Alaska, staying in the best local lodges, dining in the neighborhood hotspots, for that time while you are on a celebrity land tour, you are steeped in Alaska. Seward is one of my favorite destinations in all of Alaska and the gateway to the interior. It's a grand natural intersection between the bays and the fjords on the edge of the Pacific and the mountainous wilderness beyond. The Kenai Peninsula, on which Seward sits, extends from Cook Inlet on the mainland down to the Gulf of Alaska, and it has wetland and forest and rivers and a coastline carved out by glaciers. And the wildlife in the surrounding waters of Kenai Fjord are incredible. Humpback gray and orca whale, harbor seal, sea lions, puffins, and from the small boat harbor, about a half mile from where the ship docks, it's all accessible on a small boat excursion. Now, during the land tour, different from the cruise, we include some excursions as standard. And when overnighting in Seward, an included 50 up to 100-mile journey will take you through Resurrection, Ayalak, and Harris Bay, and as far as Kenai Fjord National Park, where 40 glaciers flow from the massive 700 square mile Harding ice field. To be in the epicenter of wildlife in their natural habitat is a big part of what is so special about Alaska. This was in 2019. I'm on the pier in Seward, conveniently between take for a travelogue we were filming, when the seals just popped up to play. They played for a good 20 minutes. Earlier on that day in Resurrection Bay, a herd of sea lions were sunning at High Island. These are big mammals. The males average 1,500 pounds. They're hunted by transient orcas. Same day, we had sightings of a pod of 15 orcas, including calves with multiple breachings. And the evening was at Winston Lodge, right on the edge of the Chugach National Forest, enjoying a great glass of wine and eating locally sourced smoked salmon BOT. That's a day in the interior of Alaska. Also on the Kenai Peninsula is Homer, 80 miles south of Seward, known as the end of the road, as it's the southernmost town on the state highway. And the unimaginable beauty of Seward follows down the coastline to Homer. Of the 156 state parks in Alaska, Kachemak Bay State Park, which is on the coast of Homer, was the first. And just think about that. When the Alaska State Park System began in 1970, of all the beauty in Alaska and the areas of critical wildlife habitat, Kachemak Bay was the first on the list. 400,000 acres. The bay's twisted rock formations from tectonic shifts, moose, mountain goat, wolves, black bear. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game estimate on the Kenai Peninsula there is black bear for every 2 square miles. And the access to Kachemak Bay is from the Homer Spit, 5 minutes away from our Homer overnight lodge. A narrow strip of land that juts 4.5 miles out into the ocean. The eastern side of the spit faces Kachemak Bay and has inlets with a boat harbor and art galleries. On the western side is Cook Inlet and the beach with views of volcanoes and mountains and gorgeous sunsets. You could kick back at Land's End Restaurant with a drink or take a kayak trip out, paddling through the rock formations. The ferry trip out to the community of Seldovia is really special. It dates back to the early 1800s, a community of a couple hundred residents with no road system connecting them to the rest of Alaska. And speaking of road systems, on the journey to Alaska, you experience one of the best in all of the U.S. The Seward Highway is recognized as America's most outstanding scenic byway. It is spectacular, right up there with the Amalfi Coast in Italy or the Dolomites in Austria. The opening 50 miles skirt the base of the Chugach National Forest that rises up over 3,000 feet. And on the shore of Turnagain Arm, there are dramatic views of the Kenai Mountains and its inlets, not uncommon to see beluga whales from Beluga Viewing Point. And the drive will take you to one of our overnight destinations, Alaska Resort. And I love this about the interior of Alaska, that you can have both the isolated wilderness of the Kachemak Bay communities and the out-and-out luxury of Alaska Resort. Nestled in the Chugach mountain range with heated swimming pools opening out onto a lush valley, and take a cable car to the top of the mountain and you'll get spectacular views of the 7 hanging glaciers and can dine among them in a restaurant awarded a AAA 4-diamond rating. An hour or so north of Girdwood is Anchorage, an incredible wilderness destination, but also the most populous city in Alaska. It's at the end of a passageway of ocean called the Cook Inlet, which keeps it a little warmer in the winter and a little cooler in the summer. And if you've thought about Alaska as cold and dark, keep in mind that's the winter. And we were sailing and land touring in late spring and summer and early fall. In Alaska, there's a greater awareness of the solstices. Due to the extreme weather changes, they're a big deal. In December, in Anchorage, the average temperature is 25 degrees, and there's about 5.5 hours of daylight. That's the shortest of the year. On the flip side, if you look at June 21st, the longest day of the year, they have about 22 hours of daylight, and the average temperature is 63 degrees. In fact, there's a fabulous restaurant in Anchorage called Simon and Seaforth that has panoramic views overlooking the Cook Inlet. And at summer solstice, you can watch the sun dip below the horizon and pop up again shortly after. It's very, very cool. It really is a foodie's paradise. Of course, the seafood is incredible, but it's also culturally a very diverse city, which feeds into its culinary scene. If you want to catch your own dinner, you can do it. Not far from downtown is Ship Creek River. There's a bait shack right there for rods and a fishing license, and a really good chance to catch a big fish. The kings start to run in May. Silver's a little bit later in July and August. The access to the wilderness is exceptional. Over 200 miles of trails and access to mountain ranges, and stay attentive for wildlife. No other city in the world has the diversity of wild animals found throughout the municipality of Anchorage. Over 1,500 resident moose. When you see a car pulled over to the side of the road, the most common reason will be a moose. Now, for truly exceptional bear viewing, take an opportunity to do an excursion to Katmai National Park, an hour south of Anchorage. At Brooks Falls Waterfall, where salmon are leaping up the falls to get to their spawning grounds, it attracts large population of brown bear, the big grizzlies. And from elevated viewing platforms, you take in one-of-a-kind, truly exceptional bear viewing. At Brooks Falls, they have cameras set up in the summertime, and this is some of their footage. Just amazing. One of the included experiences available in Anchorage is a visit to the Alaska Native Heritage Center, one of Alaska's real cultural treasures. It's a destination that preserves and strengthens the traditions and languages and art of Alaska Native peoples. A little while back, I was lucky enough to spend some time there with Yari, a Yupik storyteller, which was really, really special. Let's take a look.
One of the biggest things that I love to teach are the values of my people through storytelling, the things that my grandparents told me or taught me, and the things that I learned from other Alaska Native elders or my coworkers. So we learn from each other and we teach each other, and we teach these things. Like, for instance, the story that I shared about the first Ute, the first human.
Yeah.
The story goes, the first Ute, the first human, was put in a kayak. And the kayak washed up on the beach, and the animals were curious. They pulled in the kayak, and inside they saw a creature. He was sleeping. And the caribou says, "Look at this creature. He's not going to survive. He's going to freeze to death. He doesn't have fur like us." And the polar bear says, "He can't hunt like us. He doesn't have claws like us. He doesn't have teeth like us. He's certainly not going to make it. And we're going to call him Yuk." That's right, he's human. And we must give ourselves to this human, because without us, he won't be able to survive as long as he treats us with respect.
Right.
Eventually, the Yuk woke up. The animals looked at him and said, "You are Yuk, you're human. We have decided together that we will sacrifice ourselves to you, but you must treat us with respect. You can't take more than what you need. You must not waste, and you must share." And that's why the Native people, when we hunt and we gather, we try to utilize everything as much as we can. So those are the kinds of things that we teach to people.
100 miles north of Anchorage in the Matsu Valley is Talkeetna, which is the Alaskan town for views of Denali Mountain. The mountain ranges throughout Alaska are, of course, incredibly beautiful, but one mountain is very special. Denali, formerly Mount McKinley, is the tallest peak in North America. When measured from her base, she is bigger than Everest. So big, she creates her own weather system. And Talkeetna is the town at her base, offering incredible viewing. And the best viewing is from the overnight lodge in which we stay. Talkeetna Alaskan Lodge, just a great property, one of the best in Alaska, sits on a bluff overlooking the Sistina River Valley and the entire Alaska Range, including, as I mentioned, Denali. Now keep in mind, in summer, sunrise is at 4 a.m. So if you're willing to rise early, you're bettering your chances you'll be around when the weather clears and Denali is revealed. This was in 2019. If I remember rightly, I'd gotten up around 5 a.m. and shortly after the weather was clearing. By 7, the clouds had burned off and Denali was popping. It was magical. Lots of opportunities to view Denali from the air. If you're going to hop on a small plane, do the glacial landing. You'll get unforgettable views of the Wickersham Wall, Denali's north face, and the largest continual vertical relief in the world. And when you land on the glacier and the engines are cut, and you're standing in the Alaska Range with the peaks towering thousands of feet over you, it's just one of the best experiences you'll ever have. Also a great town to mingle with the locals, just 5 minutes away from the lodge. It's small, just 800 residents, and for a small town, there's really good eating. Check out Talkeetna spinach bread they serve from an old Airstream. Denali Brew Pub, also very good, but take the time to connect with the locals. Now, Talkeetna is just one of the destinations where you can pick up the rail. And the rail line is the lifeblood of Alaska. In the case of many backcountry communities, if you're going somewhere, you're going by boat or float plane or rail. The Alaska Railroad links Seward on the coast with Anchorage and then extends north to Fairbanks, with the route we travel, called the Denali Star, stopping at Talkeetna and Denali along the way. And although it is always the Alaska Railroad who are pulling the rail cars, there are a few different classes of rail car available. We use the best that's there, the Wilderness Express, a fantastic way to travel in Alaska. In the glass-domed upper level, there's luxury wide leather seating, full bar service, the unobstructed views of the beautiful Alaskan landscape with a railcar host narrating the experience. It's really fabulous. Any of our cruise tours include a rail segment, typically 3 to 5 hours. Some have multiple segments or travel almost exclusively by rail. I spent some time with the conductor on the Alaska Railroad the last time I was in Alaska, and it was pretty cool. So let's check in with him.
A lot of people have never been on this type of train before, where you can have these great windows and views like this. It's a little bit different from some of the railroads that they've ridden on down south, and it's just a really unique and great way to see the state.
And even though those passengers from the lower 48, they're having amazing visiting experiences, again, I understand this is a crucial rail line for those Alaskan folks who live out in the country to be able to connect to the local cities. I believe it's called the Hurricane Route, is that right?
Yeah, the Hurricane Turn train goes north from Talkeetna, and there's an area where folks who live out there have their only connection to the outside world basically is the rail line, where they're homesteading off in the wilderness and have their properties that are not connected to the road lines. So a lot of times they'll take that Hurricane Turn train, which is the only flag stop train in the United States left, where people can actually.
And that's what a flag stop is, right?
Yeah, you can flag down the train. So you can with that train, you can, like you're hailing a taxi, you can stand by the tracks and flag it down, hop on board, and they'll sell you a ticket on board. You don't have to have a ticket in advance. And then that train, you can also anywhere along its route, if you want to get off to go camping, you can let the conductor know, and I want to get off at milepost 245 or something like that, and they'll let you off there, and then you can camp and then catch it on the way back.
The journey from Talkeetna to Denali is a little over 4 hours. Denali National Park is the jewel of Alaska's interior. It's 6 million acres of pristine wild land, home to hundreds of wildlife species, including the Alaskan Big Five: bear, moose, caribou, Dall sheep, and wolves. The backcountry of Denali is highly protected. The only vehicle access is by bus, hosted by a national park ranger. There is one road, the Denali Bark Road, and the included excursions into the park, called the Denali Natural History Tour and the Tundra Wilderness Tour, offer differing experiences along it. And the scenic views along the road are spectacular, stretching through the evergreen forest into the higher elevations that open out onto views of the tundra and valleys, surrounded by the Alaska Range. More opportunities to catch Denali Mountain on a clear day. There's a few viewpoints within the first 20 miles of road, but the further you travel, the bigger the mountain gets. The sheer expanse of wilderness and the park's status as one of the last true intact subarctic ecosystem makes Denali one of the best places in the U.S. to view wildlife in their natural habitat. And some really fabulous optional excursions also. Husky Homestead, which is run by Jeff King, a 4-time champion of Iditarod, awesome storyteller. You'll ride a trail sled with his dogs, and of course, help the puppies. And this is a favorite of mine, rafting on the Nenana River. It's a big river, 140 miles. It comes from the Nenana Glacier, so the intensity of the rapids depends on summer glacial softening. You're on the water for a couple hours, enveloped in the park's wilderness. It gives such a beautiful sense of detachment. Now, it's good to recognize it's been over 400 miles since we debunked the ship in Seward. And since every land tour to Alaska's interior will visit Denali, at a minimum, these are the distances being traveled. And as with most travel, one of the most meaningful experiences are the connections to the people and the places you visit. It's why at the outset of every Celebrity Alaska land tour, you're met by your dedicated local tour guide. They're sharing their home with you, taking the time to understand the experiences that will make this the Alaskan experience you envisioned. They work in conjunction with your dedicated driver, who also transports the luggage between the motor coach and hotel rooms. They work as a team to provide you a seamless touring experience and ensure you're taking advantage of every moment. So important. 120 miles north of Denali is Fairbanks, the golden heart of Alaska and the land of the midnight sun. It has an incredible history that goes back to the early 1900s as a trading post on the banks of the Chena River serving gold miners. Before the gold miners, there were the Athabascan native peoples who for thousands of years would live in the area seasonally. And it's all brought together beautifully on an included excursion called the Riverboat Discovery. A fabulous day cruising the Chena River on a sternwheeler. As the captain navigates the Chena's waters, a bush plane pilot touches down for the pilot to talk about small aircraft travel in Alaska before a native Athabascan guide invites you into their village. The Riverboat Discovery is owned by a family called the Binkleys, whose steamboating history in Fairbanks goes back 5 generations. And I love this about Alaska. I love that the connection to their history is deep and it is real. Fairbanks has a uniqueness of extremes that is almost unparalleled. In the depths of winter, the temperature regularly drops to -20, and in the summer averages 40. May through July, when the sun elevates to its solstice, there's almost 70 straight days of sunlight, and in the winter, it barely reveals itself. August through April, that darkness reveals Aurora Borealis, also known as the Northern Lights, and on clear nights their skies become a canvas of color. It is the gates to the Arctic and home to some of the hardiest and most real people you'll ever meet. It is a fabulous destination. But unless you cross the Gulf of Alaska on an open-jaw sailing on the Millennium, the experiences on the Kenai Peninsula in the interior aren't open to you. And this, for me, is what it should be, traveling in Alaska, exploring the interior and the coastline. Because even though a cruise to Alaska is spectacular, when we think on the essential experiences we want from traveling in Alaska, they are each elevated when exploring both the interior and the coastline. Like wilderness, flying amongst the misty fjords in Ketchikan, surrounded by 3,000-foot granite cliffs jutting into the sky is an awesome wilderness experience on the cruise. But kayaking in Ketchikan Bay State Park with views of volcanoes and gorgeous sunsets, or traveling into Denali National Park surrounded by 6 million acres of highly protected wilderness, that can only be had on a celebrity land tour. Your wilderness experiences are elevated when on a cruise tour. The wildlife opportunities on the coastline are incredible. Humpback and orca whale, black bear and bald eagles, but when we consider the Alaskan Big Five, moose, caribou, bear, Dall sheep, and wolves, the best opportunity for that will be in Denali National Park. And for truly exceptional brown bear viewing, that's in Katmai National Park, that's accessible from Anchorage. Your wildlife experiences are elevated when on a cruise tour. And mountains. Throughout Alaska, the Brooks, Aleutian, and Alaska ranges are beautiful, but the one mountain that defines the experience is Denali, the tallest peak in North America. And when the clouds rise from her peak, it's a breathtaking sight. But Denali is also over 160 miles from any port in Alaska. Your mountain experiences are elevated when on a cruise tour. And glaciers, whether it's Hubbard or Sawyer or Dawes Glacier, they're all magnificent. But for access to Kenai Fjord National Park, you have to cross the Gulf of Alaska. Your glacier experiences are elevated when on a cruise tour.
So this is it. We've traveled over 1,500 miles on our virtual journey from the western seaboard and BC coast all the way to the gates of the Arctic. And as sincere lovers of Alaska, we're so excited that you're thinking about an Alaska vacation and so appreciative that you're considering Celebrity Cruises, because it will be a life-enriching experience.
Yeah,
Over to you, Kim.
I'm blown away, man. Book me now, Brendan. I am ready to go. My goodness gracious. Guys, I've been to Alaska several times, and I tell you, I need to get back there because it's been a little bit. So it's time for me to go back to Alaska and start experiencing and those fabulous journeys. Absolutely love it. So I can give you guys a little secret. So when I'm booking my personal vacations, guess who I make my reservations with? You got it, guys. That would be with the CruiseWeb. The CruiseWeb is a fantastic partner of ours. They've been in business and successfully serving all of their customers for 28 years now. Franz, Carolina, the whole crew, they are amazing. They will do everything possible and really give you the right, fit the right trip for you. They really will personalize it to the best of their ability, of course. You know, there was a lot of information that was given, and I think sometimes people feel like it's a little overwhelming. Oh my gosh, I've got so many choices. What am I going to do? The CruiseWeb is going to be for you. They're going to help you figure out which destination is key for you and the time that you have. So I think it's absolutely fabulous. And hey, look, we have a slide up here that also tells us how do we get a hold of the CruiseWeb. Guys, all you need to do is give them a call. And we thank you for your time today, and I hope to see you all in Alaska very soon. Thank you, Brendan, so much for all of your time today. We appreciate you even more. So thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you again real soon.